All right, you gloriously miserable accursed. It's the curse of politics on Friday, February the 21st, and of our special Ontario election edition, joined as always by Scott Reid and our special guest, Deb Hutton, Jordan Leichnitz, still wandering the Middle East.
Like Indy on the Well of Souls. She's got the staff and the lights going through it.
Yeah.
It's going to be exciting when she returns.
Speaking of exciting, holy Christ, McDavid in overtime.
Awesome.
Deb, were you watching?
Absolutely. We went to the Abbott. Scott knows the Abbott. Took our kids, watched the game. We sent them home at an appropriate time, but it was great. It was amazing, and we needed the win.
Yeah, we sure did.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic. I was here. In fact, my son Ben had a hockey game, and so a few of the kids from his team first went to the watch party at Scotiabank. We were allowed to skate around the ice. So they're down there skating on around the ice with old timers from the Leafs. Jack Benny, of course, wore his Gallagher jersey. And then we got word on Team Snap, a magical, welcoming word that the arena in which Ben was scheduled to play at 9:30, and therefore we would miss the end of the hockey game. The arena was inaccessible. The snow removal efforts had failed, and therefore we could not play the game, and we could watch the end of the Team Canada game. So we were very grateful for Olivia Chow's tardy snow removal efforts. It was very exciting.
The McDavid looked like he really wanted a goal on that shift.
Sure did.
In overtime, and I'm sure nobody noticed that he did it against Austin Matthews, right?
Absolutely. First thing, again on Team Snap, coach points out the first thing, like seconds after the goal, our coach is on Team Snap going, see what happens when the center doesn't take the man in the high slot? Matthews didn't take the man in the high slot. McDavid's left alone. That's a really good fucking idea, isn't it? Boom, game's over, right?
All right. So let's get to it. Let's start, as we always do, with our polling. Today's Relay Strategies polling is brought to you by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable natural gas to heat your homes and power our economy. So, have I got big news for you today?
Woo.
No, I do not have any big news for you today. What I can tell you is that with 6 days to go, it is 47 Ford, 26 Crombie Liberal, 18 Stiles NDP, and 8 Schreiner. I just want to give you.
Are we sure that Kyla's actually bothering to do the polling, or does she just go, well, for the sake of appearance, I'll change one or two of the numbers just modestly and then send them into David?
Well, she could be doing that, but I think she's actually doing it, and I think there's nothing but stasis out there. So I just do want to give you a sense of how broad this lead is and how broad this victory looks like it's going to be. Because literally Ford and the PCs are winning in every demographic group that we are looking at, right?
Are there some we're not?
Well, yes, there are some we're not. There are some we're not. I think you fall into several categories we're not measuring, Scott.
That's right. The middle-aged, scaly, angry demo.
Grumpy.
Heartbreak of psoriasis.
I'm itchy. I'm so itchy, I'm going to vote for Doug Ford. Protect my skin.
Among men, it's 50-22. Among women, it's 44-30. Among 18 to 34s, it's 46-30. Among 35 to 49, 49-23. Among 50 to 64, 51-26. Among 65 plus, 43-26. Let me just give you one more thing here. Among people born outside of Canada, 47-33. People born in Canada, but their parents weren't, 46-23. Among people born in Canada and their parents were born in Canada, 48-25. I mean, I can just go on. Low, under 35K income, 45-22. 35 to 50, 40-22. 50 to 75K, 46-25. I mean, it just go like there's no group you can find in which the Conservatives would not win this election. There are some demographics, young women, old women in which it would be a close election, but there's no demo in which Ford is not winning the election. And I will just say, from my own personal experience and observation, that I have seen numbers move in the last 6 days of a campaign, but I've never seen an election change in the last 6 days of a campaign. I've seen incremental movement on the parts of one party or another, but at this stage, it seems highly unlikely that anything could occur that would change the trajectory of this race. Any thoughts?
I think you've summed it up pretty well.
What? Sorry, did you say women who live south of Bloor who have encountered unidentified aerial phenomena? I think the Liberals have a shot there. I think there's a real scrap between them and the NDP. No, I mean, I think as this campaign moves toward its end, obviously the only race that's going to be watched intently is between second and third, and I think that race is going to be exciting and interesting, and there's lots of room for complexity there because it's going to have a lot to do with voter turnout and get out the vote effort and where they. I noticed that Mart's in southwestern Ontario today. I assume with 6 days to go, they're thinking this is our last chance that we have to be anywhere other than downtown Toronto, and really just. Like, it feels like they're closing the shutters and battening down and saying, all right, there's a storm coming and we've got to save the farmhouse here. And that means a few of those ridings in downtown Toronto. The other thing, I guess, isn't this conversation going to start to turn soon? And maybe this is unwelcome for the Ford campaign as to how big a victory this is and how historically large it's going to be. Like how many seats will Ford win, and how many other premiers, conservative premiers during that 42-year reign won 3 times in a row, albeit within a smaller time period, maybe 7 years as opposed to 12 or something. But you're going to start to get historical comparisons, and then of course the other thing they have to look forward to after victory is speculation about when he leaves. Will he leave? Is this his last term, or will he try to run for a fourth? And so it's a measure of how big your lead is that I bet before the end of this election, reporters will ask Doug Ford whether he intends to serve out his final term or run for a fourth.
Yeah, that's interesting. You sort of said maybe it's not welcome for the Ford government, but I have certainly felt that it was sort of crushingly bad when you're behind and you're trying to catch up. And the conversation in that last week turns really away from the election and toward the implications of a result that is already assumed.
Yeah. Well, it's dispiriting for them. You just don't want it to appear as though because the discussion goes that way, as a winning campaign, you don't want it to sound or leave the impression that you're taking it for granted. Neither do you want your troops to be demobilized and demotivated and then say, well, you know what, maybe I won't even bother to vote. So there's all that kind of stuff. But those are small flies in an awfully big soup.
I thought it was interesting, though, yesterday. I mean, Marit voted in her own riding, of course, but then she went to St. Paul's and then she went to the Beaches. So she was really it was just so painfully obvious why she was where she was yesterday. And it's got to be completely demoralizing. I think the other conversation that's going to start to happen is will Bonnie win her riding? And we talked a little bit about that earlier in the week. And if she can get, I think, probably up over 31, 32, then she's got a better shot at it. But where she sits right now, I don't think it looks good for her.
Well, it would be an anomaly. It's not in the numbers.
Right.
It would be an anomaly, but leaders do win in anomalous situations, right?
And leaders
do win their ridings.
Yep, for sure. But this is her first time out, despite the fact she was mayor of Mississauga. This is her first time out. This isn't an incumbent.
Yeah. Liberals have told me 2 things for the record. One, that they are confident that she's going to win, and they hint that that's because they have gone in and measured whether or not she's going to win. And so they do think that anomalous victory will occur in her home riding. And 2, that they think Wayne Gates, is it? What's his name in Niagara Falls for the NDP? Yep. They think that guy's another example of somebody that will defy national polling and that he will, for the NDP, hang on to that because it's just It's a cult of personality. That makes it sound pejorative, but it's that guy owns that riding. It's a personal stamp thing, and that independent of the national or the provincial polls that he'll win there. So those could be two ridings that defy.
You have to reward a guy with a stash like that.
But without a doubt, all the Niagara ridings are in play. I mean, there's a solid hold in Niagara West, which is where we have our farm. But and it's Tim's old riding, my husband's old riding. But the other three are all in play. And Niagara Falls, I mean, the mayor has supported Doug, such as that matters. So I'm not 100% sure of Wayne, but of all of the ridings there, that would be the one that has the most likelihood of staying NDP.
Right. But I think the Conservatives are going to be strong in that region.
So Niagara Centre is currently NDP, and they're running a guy from Port Colborne, which is part of the riding. Good guy, Bill Steele, been around for a long time, and St. Catharines is also in play. St. Catharines has been in play several times, but I mean, those are two really important ridings to watch for the Conservatives. And listen, I agree with the at a certain point, the majority almost is too big. It was a lesson I learned in '95, sitting with soon-to-be Premier Harris at his house. And I'm in my 20s. I'm a newbie. I think this is phenomenal. And he turned to me and he said, "Oh, Deb, we're going to get some folks we don't really want to get."
Right.
Yeah. That happens. But man, what a great problem to have. We're winning too big. It will create problems for us in a year.
Yeah, caucus management becomes a big issue. So there's a sweet spot where victory is amazing, and then you kind of tip over into it. But you're right. What a good problem to have.
You hear that, Kory? Ease off the throttle there, buddy.
Yeah.
Ease off.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Tell them to quit drilling. Too much gold. It's time to. You're affecting the market now. It's driving the price down.
The Ontario Real Estate Association has been telling us that Ontario's housing crisis is pushing the dream of home ownership further and further out of reach for too many Ontario families, and that municipal development charges, or MDCs, are a big part of this problem. MDCs are intended to pay for growth-related costs that accompany new housing construction. Think roads, utilities, and water infrastructure. But increasingly, we've seen many municipalities treat MDCs like a source of general revenue, placing an unfair tax burden on home buyers by adding up to $135,000 to the price of an average home. Ouch! OREA understands that municipalities have struggled to keep up with the pace of growth. But with billions of dollars in revenue from MDCs remaining unspent, it is Ontario's homeowners who are on the hook for these excessive costs that are making it even harder to own a home. OREA has offered solutions, like allowing municipalities to offer water and wastewater as they do energy, amortized across the user base. Whatever the final solution may be, Ontario's municipalities must find approaches to generating revenue that does not involve passing costs down to consumers. To read OREA's plan on how to save the dream of home ownership, read their full election platform, A Home for Everyone 2025, at orea.com/platform. All right. So despite our certainty, there is a campaign going on, and the hockey game last night was political in more ways than one. It was certainly the most political hockey game played since September of 1972. But also it was political in the fact that with a assumed massive Canadian audience, massive Ontario audience, all three parties had ads on. Deb, how did you assess what they were showing Ontarians as they sat in front of that screen watching the game?
Yeah, so not a lot of surprise. And I will say, because as I said, we were out in watching it in public. People tuned out during the ads. Like you could see physically people turning away. But my takeaway was that the Liberals did well in terms of putting their spots where they needed them. There was a Polyev ad as well, a couple of them. So I think, they probably spent their money well. I'm not sure they got a huge amount out of it. And maybe if you're at home, it was different. I don't know. But certainly out in public, that was the time to turn back and talk to your friends.
Stiles ran an ad, Deb, but it was an intro ad, right? It was it's like a week to go, and it's like, here's who Merritt Stiles is.
Yeah. It's a good ad. She looks, as we've discussed, she's so camera friendly and all that stuff. She looks great, but to what end? Like, really, to what end?
I I, I
Scott,
think
you're biased. You got a dog in this race, but
I definitely have a dog in this race. I mean, the Liberal ad. I'll just be transparent at the risk of upsetting and embarrassing my son. But my son wrote and produced that ad, that spot, that hallway ad where you see a patient shivering. It's only 15 seconds long, two 15-second hits. You see a patient shivering in a parking lot as though they've been moved from their room to the hallway to the parking lot and saying, is this where it heads next? I'll also note that ad is born of personal experience. A month ago, my son was in a hospital and he was in the room for 2 days. And then they said, yeah, you got to move into the hallway. So he spent 4 nights in a hallway. So it was a burning passion of his. But
what else has Jack been doing recently so that we can anticipate the next Liberal ad?
Yeah, exactly. I think it might be about drinking very late at night and complaining about the polls and how us old people don't get it. I thought a couple things about that ad though. I thought one, they got lucky, right? And they know they got lucky because it came in the first period. It came like right after the first Canadian goal. So people were like, whoa, it wasn't sort of halfway through the second period or something. Like it wasn't in a lot, like it was the first political ad. It hit, it was only 15 seconds. Then there's a break. Then you got another one. And I think it was a bit arresting. It was brand new creative. The Conservatives had new creative as well. But I think that I thought it captured people's attention, probably, if any ad politically yesterday caught people's attention. So they got lucky about it. I also want to broaden it out and just say I went to Bonnie Crombie's speech yesterday at the Canadian Club, where I got to tell you, it was an interesting performance to watch. She delved into the story, which she'd hinted at in the Northern debate. She spent probably 10 minutes talking about her father. So the focus of the speech, there was some economics, but a lot of it was about mental health and addictions. And she really unveiled the whole story about her father and his struggle with addiction and the effect it had on their family. And it's a story that's familiar to a lot of families. So you can really feel it resonating as people are like, oh, Jesus, that was my uncle, or that was my aunt, or that was my dad. And so it was just, and I know that's not going to turn the tables. I have a thought about it in the do-over, but everybody in that room went,
but she also
wow.
could have grown up in poverty. Would that mean you should run an ad about you should be running on poverty reduction right now?
No, I'll come back to that, but I think to the degree to which they've been emphasizing health and hallway medicine and family docs, I thought they had a good day, and I thought they made more news again 2 days in a row. 2 days ago it was about balls. Yesterday it was about health, and I just think they made news. So they're punching through in a way that the NDP don't seem to. So they're happy with this result. If this means that they get official opposition and they get more seats in the NDP, right? Like winning is not in the cards. So it's a relative win, not an objective win, I think.
Right.
It was a huge announcement.
Sorry, go ahead, Deb. What were you going to say?
Well, just huge announcement, like in terms of cost, like universal mental health care. That's massive.
Yes, but fuck, I'm sorry. You can't talk about this when Doug Ford is running on his journey to the center of the earth 401 tunnel. It's just not you can't say, I
don't think fiscal responsibility is on the table in this election campaign, really. Right?
Well, in the words of Mark Carney, there's spending and then there's investment.
I want to spend less to invest more.
Yeah.
I want to kiss less and get more pregnant. I don't know.
So you haven't talked about the PC ads, and I don't know which negative they ran. I didn't see them, but I did. They do have a really nice closing consolidation spot about Ford, right?
Yeah, looking very premier-like, looking strong. It's a great ad.
And it's right on the money for what the theme of the campaign has been. He's back in Washington today, hoping that he can just remind and reinforce that. Plus, again, the world is working in his favor. Donald Trump has to be a dick, of course, on the day of the hockey game. Glad that we got to shove that down his orange throat. But, all that sort of creates energy. That closing ad is beautiful for the Ford guys. Like, it really is just dynamite.
And our erstwhile columnist, Jordan, did chirp in to us on WhatsApp her unhappiness about how many workers Ford puts in his ads.
Yes.
Right.
Everybody's wearing a vest. Everybody in a Ford ad has a vest and a hard hat.
Greetings, Canadian Political Pod listener. I'm your narrator, Gary, an artificial intelligence-generated voice. Exciting and serious sounding is what we typed in the AI voiceover input field. And boom, Gary exists. Hey, do you know what's not artificial? Not even one bit? The highly influential audiences air quotes media podcasts offer to its advertisers. And I say that with all the sincerity a machine learning, data-optimized, predictive network of interconnected neural nodes can muster. Whether your ad message is on Curse of Politics, the Hurly-Burly, Hotel Pacifico, or the brand new Race to Replace, you will be reaching cabinet ministers, members of parliament, the political class, the C-suite, and corporate Canada, leading journalists, and tens of thousands of engaged Canadians. People saying this is a unique political moment is underselling it. Policy is under scrutiny. A party leader is being voted on. The Ontario election is underway. There will be a new prime minister. And then there's the guy living in the White House who calls us the 51st state. Does anyone remember another time like this? I'm instantly scouring millions of data points to answer my own rhetorical question. No, you do not. This is when you need to get your message to the decision makers. Email us at contact@airquotesmedia.com. You'll be dealing with Jill and Todd, who are real, not artificial at all people, and generally very friendly. Well, Jill is anyway. We're still deciding about Todd.
All right. So, do-overs.
Well, speaking of
first.
vests, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to, because I mean, again, I'm biased, but I love the ad that they did yesterday on hallway medicine, because it was so sharp. And I liked what Bonnie had to say yesterday at her speech. My do-over is I wish those things had happened in the first or at least the second week. I don't mind them now. Obviously, it's better than having a wasted day, but I think it felt like they finally got that right, and a health day right. And I wish they'd had that health day in the first week and were really bringing it. So that's my only do-over. It's not so much what they did, it's when they did it.
All right. Deb?
Well, I was going to say, speaking of vests and the premier, yesterday he was with the Sikh Motorcycle Club who were supporting him, and they put him in a leather motorcycle vest. And honestly, I'd go back to the early t-shirts over the leather vest. This has been a campaign of unflattering clothing on the premier. Not that it matters. It's obviously not impacting his numbers, but oh man.
Where would one find flattering clothing for the premier?
No. You put him in a well-made suit. He looks like a premier, 100%.
Bad. You got his engine started. I tell you, he makes love like a man half his age. But I was interested. They had him in the leather vest. I wondered if he was going to reach into his pocket and say, well, should I put my mask on? And he sort of gimped out for the crowd and all, like, took it the whole way. But I guess leather's I don't know. He's really exploring the far reaches of demos now. Now he's going for the bondage crowd. I'm going to get that bondage vote this time, says Kory.
Anyhow, so not a massive do-over. I do want to say, because the last couple of days I've been a little bit critical of the fact that they've not been doing scrums. And he had a good media day yesterday, and proof that, he can handle the media. I understand the sort of safe strategy, but he looks good when he's doing that stuff. He sounds good when he's doing that stuff. And as long as he keeps tight, it should be a positive, not a negative.
My do-over's similar to Scott's, but a little different in emphasis. And I don't say this with any anger, but I don't think they should have done that day yesterday. I don't think they should have run that ad in the game last night. I mean, I would have agreed with them at the start of the campaign that healthcare was the soft underbelly of the Ford government politically. But this election isn't turning out to be about healthcare. It just isn't turning out to be about healthcare. They've given it their damnedest. They put it on their bus. They talk about it day after day. They've got a big program. They're spending a shitload of money. They've done advertising on the negatives about it. And Ontarians think Ford is terrible at healthcare. But this election isn't about healthcare, and the Liberals haven't convinced any people that they're the best people to deal with it anyway. So a couple of days ago, they made a shift to cost of living and to their tax cut program, and I think they should stay with that.
Yeah.
In the last run, I think that's where the votes are. I think that's where people's mindset is. If they're thinking about Washington, they're thinking about Trump. If they're thinking about cost of living, not Trump. If they're thinking about Washington, they're thinking about Ford. But if they're thinking about cost of living, they're still thinking about Ford because nobody else has convinced them, but they're weak on it. And the Liberals have a little momentum on it. So I still think that's my do-over is get back to that. That's where the votes are.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, but them's the breaks.
David, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Because I was more or less saying the same thing with my do-over. But what's the theory of that, of what you're saying? Like when I look at the map, does it mean that if you do that, you can try to steal 3% in the 905 back from the PCs? And does that get you anywhere?
What, do you work for data sciences?
Well, I'm just exactly. And that's why we're going to be talking about lowering the voting age in a blast of emails to fucking who knows. Anyway, but no, I was just like, I mean,
if they steal 2 or 3 points in the next week, if they steal 2 or 3 points and get to 30, 31, they're going to win some seats.
Mm-hmm.
Like a fair number.
But it doesn't have to come from the PCs either.
It does. It does, I think.
Why?
Because they're at 15, the NDP. How much more can you get out of them? And
they're at 18 today. It's hard to squeeze it further. But second, in the 905, particularly if Bonnie's going to win her seat, they need more points in the 905.
I just think the New Democratic vote is like, I'm not suggesting they're in good shape, but it's more efficient than the Liberal vote, and affordability can come from both sides. I don't see that it has to just come from the Conservatives.
No, that's right. But
to pick up some seats, like very specific seats.
By the way, David, the Liberals might have caught a small break yesterday. Coverage of Bonnie's speech actually went with an economic focus, not the mental health as much. Like if you look at, nobody does, but if you look at the Star today, it actually is it's a story about what she said about the economy and investment. So they may have gotten a little bit of cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
But again, like I feel so old when I make a point like that. Like who, with due respect to our friends, like Benzie, who's reading the Toronto Star now? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, Deb, you and I are on the radio or TV every day, and I feel like, am I just yelling down a pipe that has no one at the other end?
I don't know. I don't know. I think
you can't afford to not
still
do it, but you do wonder about like what's the value and virtue of it anymore.
Well, and I think the Star has always prided itself in having more Ontario coverage. So in an election campaign, I think people do look there. They may not get the newspaper on their front porch like you do, Scott, but that doesn't mean they don't read the coverage.
It's been this way for a while, Scott. Do you remember in the 2018 campaign, they didn't allow the Star to cover them effectively, right? They didn't release an itinerary. They didn't tell you where he was going to be. They covered themselves. They created that Ontario News thing and covered themselves. And I thought, this is going to hurt them. It did not hurt them. Not one tiny little bit. And that's when I knew I was old. Okay.
I'm telling you, these livery stables are never going anywhere. People like their horses.
I want to start federally with a question for you two, and it's a genuine question. I don't know the answer. Why is the Trudeau government still fucking governing? Why are they day after day now releasing massive announcements with huge spending components to them on things that, frankly, are not that helpful politically? Like, what? Why don't they just go away? They're 2 weeks from being out of office. They're not going to do these things. What are they doing?
Well, I asked a similar question. You guys both said legacy.
Yeah. You know the answer.
What? They're hurting the party. They're hurting the party. Get out of the window. If Pascal St-Onge is in the window, that means Mark Carney doesn't get that coverage that day. Get the fuck out.
And why did Pierre Trudeau make a flash of 80 appointments and left some of them for Turner to make, right? It's because when prime ministers leave the stage, They want to stand under the spotlight one more time, to wave at everyone and say, this would be my legacy. And inevitably, it's harmful to their own party's interests, but their party's interest is in conflict with their personal interest, or at least what they perceive to be their personal interest.
Well, it's been a long time since Justin Trudeau gave a shit about the Liberal Party. I mean, he wouldn't still have been there in January if he did. So I don't think he has any care about the party whatsoever.
Leaders, but that's not the logic of leaders. Leaders, as we all know, that they would not accept that construct. They believe that the party's interest is wrapped up in their own interest, and that he believed, until he had no choice left to him, that he remained, and I'm sure he believes to this moment, that he remains the party's best interest. He's looking at the polling and watching Mark Carney to make the party competitive again, and thinking, yeah, but I would still be doing better if it was me. That's just the way that's the way these guys are wired.
He's delusional.
They all are. You can't get that far without being delusional.
It's been a long time since we've seen somebody this bad, though. Like this, out of touch. He's unbelievable.
So, Deb, you've been talking through the campaign about Ford's relationship with the media, and we just talked about it a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. So yesterday, Pierre Poilievre did a announcement of some kind, and he said he would only take questions from his mother and 3 people who owed him money.
Yeah, that was about it.
Well, he came on my show.
Okay.
Does that count for something?
How much do you owe him?
Yeah, he did a bunch of sit downs with a number of radio, TV. I think he did CTV, did CP24. Those are the ones I saw. I don't know who else he did. I don't really understand why he did what he did yesterday and sort of itemized it. It was a bit odd to me. I don't think I mentioned yesterday, we made the decision under Harris to not do the Toronto Star editorial board because we felt that they were so biased and unfair in their coverage that it wasn't worth doing it. But I think yesterday's, we'll take it from 5 people and itemize them was a bit too much.
Well, I think there's a logic to why they did it. I think that they did it. And I do think this is, they're going to dismiss us. Jenny would tell me I've got my head up my ass.
And likely will.
Likely. But I think they did it because of the CBC announcement. I think they saw Pascal Saint-Onge making this big announcement about CBC, and they said, they didn't just kind of pick and choose their media outlets. They released a notice saying, here's who we'll take questions from. And most of them were www.mediabullshitconservativesupporterstartup.com. And so I think they were, and then they, we're taking, from the free media, from the independent media, right? Who, most of them, let's face it, are ball scratchers. And so I think that's why they did it yesterday. I think they did it because, well, if they're going to talk about CBC, we're going to talk about, whatever, the Rebel or something.
But again, as we agreed, it makes no difference probably, right? Except for their message is even smaller. I mean, we can talk about the Toronto Star, but it does have a broader reach than True North.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a signal, right, to those guys. And even as they watch him pivot and move, then those pockets can still be content, and not flirt with the People's Party, I guess.
Right. You just want to talk about the Carney economic policy of a couple of days ago? We didn't get to that yesterday. Don't think.
Well, Deb and I did, but you were
you were on the beach.
You were taken.
Okay, well then I have one question about it. I have one question about this formulation of invest more and spend less. All right. Scott, direct this to you. Does this take the traditional, almost invariable liberal claim of hidden conservative agendas for spending cuts off the table? If you're going to say we're going to spend less and you're not going to articulate what you're going to spend less on, then that probably leaves you unable, at least as unable effectively, to say that the conservatives are going to hack away at spending because they don't believe in these lovely social programs that have been instituted.
Well, yes, they will find that it will practically undermine that claim because they may think that they preserve that option of making that argument. But when they get to it, they're going to find themselves tied in knots as people ask them, well, what about this item? What about this item? What about this item? Those things don't sound like investments that have a long-term yield. Those things sound like
And if you start to say dental care is an investment, then you've vitiated
and they will.
Formula.
And this is what bothers me. But I think this distinction is one, that is fine for the monk debate. But I think that in a political campaign, I think they're going to find this distinction between operating and capital will become very difficult to maintain. Good spending and bad spending. And I worry that it's the kind of thing that when people sit around who are like-minded in a room and draw it up on the board, it all is nice and tight and it fits. But this isn't a podcast with Malcolm Gladwell. This is going to be an election campaign. And I think it's an opening for the Conservatives, and it distresses me.
Yep.
The one point of differentiation that we at least have now is around the size of the civil service. So Carney said he's going to cap the size of the civil service. And I think that's where Poilievre intends to, push him hard on, because you can't increase the size to the level that the Liberal government has and then say you're just going to cap it. I actually do think there's a point of differentiation there. But to Scott's point, once you start into this realm, then there's just one question after another. And, we have no sort of parameters around it other than the cap on public sector.
Right. Okay, let's wheel around for a conclusion. Blessings and curses.
Well, it has to be our hockey team. Got to get a blessing. Sure.
Is that what you're doing? You're going to take that one?
Taking that one. It's the easy one.
Do it. Expound rhetorically. Give us, emote for us, Deb.
Why?
Well, let's hear a little bit about Binnington. Much pilloried for his soft play, and then suddenly stands up in overtime like a giant. I thought, it was for me, rallying, wonderful win.
The blessing is around the politics of it, and just it was something I think, as I said at the outset, we needed, and it felt good for so many people, whether you watched the game or not. It was, as I said, I was out in public watching it. That they just everybody so engaged. It was great. It was really what I think the country needed.
Excellent, Scott.
Well, mine's pretty similar, actually. I'm going to give my blessing to Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know even just here we were beating up on him a bit, but I thought that his comment after the game in the political context with Trump trolling and denigrating Canada once again earlier in the day, his comment after, posted, you can't take our country, you can't take our game. I thought it was spot on. I thought it captured the mood of the country. And, Justin Trudeau hasn't had a lot of moments where it seems like he's in full alignment with the mood of the country in the last 18 months. And I thought he expressed what people felt. And I was glad that they made that reference, because it wasn't just a hockey game, not in the context of what's happening with the United States and the breakdown in the relationship, which is entirely motivated by the belligerence of Donald Trump. So
yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was a good tweet.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good tweet. I'm gonna do something I've never done before in my life.
Oh my God! You're going to take your top off.
Never even really thought about doing before in my life. I'm going to give my blessing to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
Mm.
Stephen Harper wrote an op-ed in the National Post and the Globe and Mail that's very, very compelling and stirring in its defense of Canada and its assertion that this country, that the number one objective of this country right now needs to be to withstand this threat from the United States and to remain an independent country true to its history and traditions. I found it very moving to read. I know that there's some stuff in there, some political shots at the government about wokeism and stuff, but you know what? I'm prepared to blow past that. I don't want only people who agree with me politically to stand up for Canada. I want every Canadian to stand up for Canada. And Harper did it really well and did it really, really clearly. And he has a constituency. He has a following. He has stature. It mattered. It mattered to me to read that. So thank you, former Prime Minister. It was really well done, and it was really important.
You're here.
Yep, a couple powerful interventions by him in the past month.
So that's it, folks. We'll be back on Monday. And you know what? Hope springs eternal. We'll be polling through the weekend, and God knows what we'll have to tell you on Monday. In the meantime, enjoy all of your rest. I want to thank our sponsor, OREA, the Ontario Real Estate Association, and I want to thank Enbridge for sponsoring our polling today. And all of you, have a great weekend, for sure. And dig out if you have to. And it's warming up in the prairies, and things are looking brighter. Have a good time. See you on Monday.